right. Give it a second to get people logged on. Let's check the stream. Okay, we're good. So welcome to Talking to Kids About Boundaries and Consent. My name is Melinda Sampson, the Community Outreach Coordinator for NC Stop Human Trafficking. And Bonnie Jean, please introduce yourself.
And I'm Bonnie Jean Kurz, and I'm from Teddy Bear Children's Advocacy Center, and I'm one of the community educators there as well.
And today we're going to be talking to you about talking to kids about boundaries and consent. I'm monitoring the comments on Facebook, so if you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and we'll be happy to answer those later if you watch this on a recording. So let's keep on trucking here. I'm going to move through all of that because this is a crossover, so you don't need to know all about us. So what we're going to be talking about today are tips for teaching boundaries, tips for teaching consent, and effective ways to address porn. But we're going to talk about that later this month. But there are some resources that are going to be up here. So we're going to be talking to kids about boundaries now. So why is teaching boundaries important? Boundaries are essentially about understanding and respecting our own needs and being respectful and understanding the needs of others. And for that to work, we need to be putting a big emphasis on helping kids develop greater empathy and self-awareness. So while we're talking about boundaries, I want you to think about what your boundaries are as a person. When did someone cross the line? How young were you when you felt that feeling of disrespect and when your boundary got crossed? It's really important for us to understand what our boundaries are, so we can understand where our kids are kind of coming from. So what are personal boundaries to begin with? So they're basically relationship ground rules. They're our claim to privacy and establishing what makes us comfortable and uncomfortable. So when you're talking about boundaries in developing boundaries for young children, what you're going to need is an open line of communication. Am I right, Bonnie Jean, or am I right?
Absolutely. Not only are you right about that as open lines of communication, but the other piece is that it's really about developing trust and relationship between our children, not just for the little ones, but for the big ones too, our teenagers as well, because we want to be the ones that our children come to. And so if we are the ones that have those open lines of communication, the ones that they are willing to come to and talk to, it's because we are able to have those conversations about anything and everything without overreacting, over-responding, talking about boundaries, talking about consent. That means that we are okay to talk to. We aren't gonna overreact and over-respond. So we're gonna talk about things that are comfortable and uncomfortable without getting kind of crazy-eyed, without overreacting, without over-responding, and without acting like we're uncomfortable. And without getting judgy too. That's really important.
And that big judgment piece is going to go a long way, not only with young children, but with teens. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So tip number one, what you could start doing is talk with younger children in a body positive manner. So Bonnie Jean mentioned shame. We don't want to shame children for having body parts because we all have them. Make sure you're using anatomically correct words when we're talking about body parts. There is nothing wrong with calling your body parts what they are. You can say vagina and penis, and it may be uncomfortable, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, letting young children know what they actually are is important. We don't rename our arms, but there are also other ways, like kid-friendly ways to let them know what their body parts are too. So
that's really important. That is really, really important. And you know what? I think the other piece is making sure that we name them something that is age appropriate,
right? But
that we don't call them something that's confusing, like cookie or biscuit or something. I'm not from the South. And that is something that I heard when I came down here, that's what we call these things. And those are things that can cause confusion. And those are things that if something does happen or something goes wrong, and if a child does try to report that something has happened to them, calling it a cookie or calling it a biscuit or a ding-a-ling or something like that, that can cause confusion for children, so that when they do make a report, the adults that are listening to the report are going to be confused. So that's why we want to talk about anatomically correct, age appropriately correct, and also understanding that then they understand that there's no shame in calling it what it is.
Yes. And a way you can be pretty clear about it is you can use the term private parts. So we're all on the same page about that. Or you can describe those parts, like you can say your vagina or your penis or whatever is covered by a bathing suit. And children understand that very well. And that doesn't confuse anything for adults and for kids. So another tip, begin talking about the body through the lens of health and wellness, which this is going to be amazing because not only are you teaching kids about their body parts, but you're also teaching about health and wellness things that they need to learn anyway. It's a great way to address bodily autonomy and boundaries when you're talking about health and wellness. So talking about being clean and seeing the doctor is a way to make it clear what is acceptable touch and what is inappropriate touch, which Bonnie Jean's going to unpack that a little bit more for us. And also, just so we're 100% clear, we at NC Stop Human Trafficking say that you should always be in the room with the doctor while they're doing the exam, because it makes the child feel more comfortable and you'll know what's going on and they won't be scared. And yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, and most facilities, medical care facilities, require that to begin with. That is something that they have as one of their practices and policies and procedures, that there is an adult in the room with the child, a caregiver in the room with the child. That is something that is part of practice policies and procedures that people should be paying attention to.
So another tip, establish what is safe touch and what is not okay. So allow them to make decisions when they want to be touched. What I mean by that is don't make children hug people or sit in anyone's lap or get tickled if they don't want to. And I'm going to talk a little bit about defending your that child's decision in a second. But Bonnie Jean, would you like to weigh in on this one?
Yes, I think that that's really important, because one of the things we do as adults is we give our children mixed messages. Oftentimes we tell them to do what the adults tell you to do, but don't do what the adults tell you to do. For instance, we will say things like, don't take candy from strangers. And then we say, go knock on the door of complete strangers on October 31st and ask for candy from those exact strangers we have said not to take candy from. So we give them that type of message. Or we say, don't get hugs or kisses from strangers or people you hardly know. But then around the holidays, we have family members that we hardly know, distant cousins, aunts or uncles that come to the house, and yet we insist that our children get kisses and hugs from them, even though it is obvious that our children are uncomfortable getting hugs and kisses from a long distant auntie that they haven't seen in weeks, months, maybe even years, and that auntie insists on kissing them on the lips. Doesn't matter, that's just what that auntie does. But we really need to be respectful of our children and say, maybe there's a different way that we can show a sign of respect to that particular auntie by offering to take her coat instead, or doing a high five, and teaching that auntie that nowadays children don't necessarily want that kind of greeting, and that it's not disrespectful to actually say to an auntie, let's greet a different way, somehow, some way. Talking to the adults and having the adults adjust their greeting methodologies is a sign of respect towards our children. Talking about consistent consent to our children and consistent consent to our adults is really important at this point in time. Letting them know that we need to be consistent in what our expectations are and about boundaries is really important, about gaining respect for our children, gaining respect for the adults around, and holding everybody accountable. And that lets predators and children know that we are creating a culture of trust, safety, and security for our children, that we are the trusted adults that children will come to then if something has gone awry or if something untoward has happened to them, that then we are the adults that they will come to because they know that we have created an environment of safety for them, that we can be trusted to think of their safety first.
Totally right, Bonnie Jean. And honestly, I am from the South, so I do understand for people who are like me, that big culture shift that's going to, and it might not just be South oriented, but that big culture shift, what we're talking about when we're talking about not making kids hug family members. Because it's good. It takes, as a caregiver anyway, I'm a mom of a 5-year-old right now. So it takes a lot of defending the boundaries that she sets up and adults looking at me in a very strange way. But at the end of the day, it's definitely worth it, because later when she needs to say something, she knows that she can say it to me anyway. So anyway, nice little personal parable on my end. Another tip, let them know that exposure to pornography or other people's private parts is not okay. That's actually non-contact child sexual abuse. If kids accidentally stumble on pornography, however, which happens because it's so prevalent and the internet is definitely saturated with pornography, we have a session later this month to talk about how you talk to kids about pornography. But just so you know, if they are exposed to pornography by somebody else, is insisted on by someone else's what's the word I'm looking for, Bonnie Jean?
I'm not quite sure. I'm thinking their social media account or their computer, anything that they can see it.
Yeah, if somebody else shows it to them or anything along that line, that is non-contact child sexual abuse. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And so there are some books out there to help parents and caregivers. So we have Say No and Tell here at NC Stop Human Trafficking. And Bonnie Jean, are you going to show a few books yourself?
Oh, yes. We've got quite a few books that we've been talking about, too. Say No and Tell are two that you've been talking about. But we also have one called C is for Consent.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another one that we've been sharing during our trainings at Teddy Bear Children's Advocacy Center, which is called An Exceptional Children's Guide to Touch. And this one is really good in regards to the fact that it really outlines for folks a couple of different things. It talks about accidental touch, friendly touch, hurtful touch, touching myself and not touching, and having my picture taken. So it really outlines for parents all of these different types of touch, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, and what's healthy and what's not healthy. And again, I'm using this terminology: inappropriate, appropriate, healthy, and not healthy. And you will notice I am not using the terminology good versus bad, because that type of language can be confusing for children, because oftentimes perpetrators or predators of sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, are oftentimes people that they know, and therefore children aren't aware of whether it's good or whether it's bad, because they can be manipulated into thinking that it's good because it's someone that they know, love, and care about. So we kind of avoid that language just because of that, and we really focus on whether it's touch that is healthy for them or unhealthy for them, or appropriate or inappropriate. So I want to make sure that I focus on that. And this book really does help give that guideline. And then the other book that we've talked about too with folks, which also is available on Amazon as well, is called Let's Talk About Body, Boundaries, Consent, and Respect. And all of these are really helpful for parents as well as educators in terms of working with children, helping them understand what is inappropriate, appropriate, and healthy touch.
So now we're going to move into adolescents and teens. What fun. Because young children, they, are pretty impressionable. They're little sponges. Adolescents and teens pretty much have developed their standards for the most part. Maybe not so much adolescents, but anyway, there are tips to go about talking to them about boundaries too. And again, we're going to go back to the golden rule, the open line of communication and that trusted adult that they can go to if something goes awry or if they have questions. Mm-hmm. So keep that open line quite open. And you want to be the one to start the conversation. You want to find out what boundaries they may already have or what they don't have. You want to see where they're at around what respect is for them. If you kind of missed the boat in the young ages, that's okay. But as you start the conversation with them when they're adolescents or early teens, you'll find where their boundaries are and kind of, if you feel like their boundaries are, porous or a moving target, you can do what you can to kind of solidify it for them, and learning what their boundaries are is going to help you get to know that child a lot more.
I think that also goes along with what their misperceptions are, what they know and what they don't know, because oftentimes adults assume what children know and what they don't know, and assume that they have told children certain things, or things have been implied in conversations that they really have not understood. So that is something that is incredibly important, is that parents think they have said something or that they have made something very clear, and that the child has not actually understood what they have said, because it was implied and it was not actually stated right out there at the onset. So making sure that you've clarified that is really important.
Also, Bonnie Jean, talk about the wandering questions, which you really enlightened me the other day, and I think it's a good time to start talking about it.
Talking about wondering questions instead of judging questions, I think is really important. When you talk about all of these types of things that are related to boundaries and the act of sex and the body parts, all of these types of things, asking them in a wondering fashion rather than in a judgment way. Let's say you're having the opportunity where you're watching a television show where two teenagers go off into the bedroom. That's a wonderful opportunity to have that type of wondering question, wondering conversation with your child, where you're saying something along the lines of, what do you think about this? These two teenagers are going off into the bedroom. There's no supervision. There's no adult around here. It looks like there might be drinking going on. It looks like there's, no protection. It doesn't, they're in the bedroom alone. What do you think is going to be happening? Do you think that there's going to be consent? Do you think there's going to be protection? It doesn't sound like they have had a conversation about consent. Having these kinds of conversations where you're not overreacting, you're just asking questions, and you're giving your child the opportunity to think about it, respond in a non-threatening way. It's not saying, what are you doing? It's not saying, what would you do in this situation? It's saying, what do you think's happening in that situation? It's giving them an opportunity to think about it and respond. And then you can dig a little bit deeper and say, well, what do you think? Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? What do you think is going to happen next? Do you think that that's a safe thing to do? Do you think that that is healthy for them to be doing that? Do you think there should be a conversation about consent? Is that continual consent? That gives them an opportunity to think about the situation before they're actually in it, without you showing any type of judgment. And it gives them the opportunity to kind of feel you out to see what your thoughts are about it. And then you can have an open dialogue about what's safe, what's not safe, what's healthy, what isn't healthy, where there's no judgment. That gives the opportunity then for them to see you as a safe individual, where then you can actually say, well, here's what is safe. Here's what isn't safe. Here's what is continual consent. Here's what probably should happen to keep you safe. If you were in this situation, here's what should happen. That way you can really guide the conversation to one that creates a culture for your family of safety, security, respect, and trust. And then they see you as someone that they can come to. Then you can say, wow, if this went bad, here's probably what you could do to make it a better situation. If I were that person's parent, I would love for them to come to me. Then you can open that kind of, if it goes bad, here's what could happen. If it goes bad for you, here's what I would love for you to be able to do. You could have those kinds of conversations in a wondering way, and then create that scaffolding so that your child will know, wait a minute, my parent, my mother, my father, my auntie, there's someone I can trust and I can turn to and know that they're not going to overreact and over-respond. And it gives them the opportunity to see you as someone that they can trust and know that you will react and respond in a way that's appropriate, and that you are actually giving them accurate information where they are not learning from someone who might be preying upon them later on, or manipulating them, or forcing them or coercing them by giving them inaccurate information.
Thank you. Another tip, and this one might be a little tough to hear, but you want to honor their boundaries too. You want to show them that their boundaries are important by honoring them yourself. It's kind of a practice what you preach type of thing. And I say that because there are a lot, and I'm not trying to tell anybody about how to be a caregiver. Of course, I want you to do what's comfortable for you. But so a no closed door policy, if an adolescent or a teen wants privacy, that could be problematic if they've expressed that they wanted that privacy, and you and a caregiver doesn't want to give them that. That's not honoring the boundaries that they've set. And if you feel like that's the best way to go, again, I'm not trying to tell anybody how to be a caregiver. Be sure you're telling them why, and having that open line of communication in that conversation with them. But do your absolute best to show them that their boundaries are important to you. That's what I would say around that, because young children start having boundaries. They start showing their boundaries at an early age, by shutting the door when they go to the bathroom. I hadn't told my daughter to shut the door when she started going to the bathroom by herself. If they're in a household with more siblings, they sometimes partition off their own room to get the little privacy that they want. And these are young children, so adolescents and teens still have that desire to have some privacy at least. So just keep that in mind. And you want to empower them. Let them know they don't have to rush. They don't have to rush emotional involvement in a relationship. And so when I say that, let them know that if somebody tells them that they love them, that they don't have to say it back. Okay, they're not obligated to say it back. They're actually not obligated to do anything in a relationship. So let them know they don't have to rush physicality in a relationship either, because as adolescents and teens, it's hard for them to navigate that area. They don't want to hurt somebody or, lose that relationship. But at the end of the day, if they've established the boundaries that they need to establish, then that would be letting them know that they don't have to rush into anything, and they don't owe anybody anything.
That is the key. They do not owe anybody anything. The relationship is not about owing anybody anything. It is not a tit for tat situation. It is not about exchange of any kind.
I think once you let them know that relationships aren't transactional, and if that relationship has become transactional, then it's time to vacate said relationship. That would be beneficial, and really drive home the point that they don't ever owe anyone sex ever at all. It doesn't matter if that person bought them dinner or gave them some rides or bought them nice things, and we're spinning off into the beginning of grooming and trafficking when we talk about buying nice things. But once they realize that they don't ever owe anyone anything in a relationship, because that's then a transactional relationship and not a good one, that goes a long way in them pulling the plug on that relationship on their own once you empower them to know the difference. Also, digital boundaries are very important too, because young folks are online. They're on social media. It would be definitely a misnomer to say that they're not. Even when you forbade them to be on social media, they probably still are. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have available for caregivers around keeping kids safe online. But in the meantime, you can always visit NCMEC or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they have a NetSmarts program that has some good information. It's a little dated, just a smidge, but the information's still good. You also want to make it clear that they should not be the ones to coerce or pressure anyone else into compromising their boundaries. So we have talked a lot about how we can empower adolescents and teenagers to maintain their boundaries. However, we also need to talk about adolescents and teenagers who like to cross lines and step over boundaries and disrespect people, because we need to make sure that adolescents and teens know that's not okay either. They should not be perpetrators of, disrespecting people. So
can I jump in there for just a quick second there? Because, 40% of the time when there is child sexual abuse, it is 40% of the time it is child on child perpetration. Mm-hmm. And that is oftentimes perceived as because the child is older or physically larger than the other child. But what we also need to consider is this: it is the child is older or physically larger than the other child, but that it's a balance of power that is the issue overall. But there also we need to consider the other types of power. The other types of power that we also see with children is intellectual power. Children who are identified as children who have intellectual needs or learning disabled, who are considered learning disabled or exceptional children. They may have physical needs or intellectual needs. Then they're not necessarily talked to about their bodies because the adults around them feel like they don't need to know about their bodies because they're not going to be using them. So they don't know that someone's doing something to their bodies that they're not supposed to because they don't know about them. And so they don't know that somebody's doing something to their bodies because they haven't been told that this is not okay. So that's something that we need to be considering and thinking about as adult caregivers, that if we have children with intellectual needs or physical needs, we still need to talk to our children about their bodies and let them know what's going on and let them know what is okay and what is not okay about their bodies so that they can articulate or let us know. The other thing about this is social power. We need to think about this, that there are, anyone who has spent any time in a middle school, even in elementary school, middle school, or high school cafeteria, you walk into that cafeteria or you walk onto a playground, you know who has the social power. And children work very hard to fit in. And so oftentimes they will be asked to do things that they don't necessarily think are okay, but they may choose to do them because they want to fit in. They are told to do these things and they will do things because of the social power dynamic. And that is not okay. And so that is something that you need to think about. And so people think it's a matter of choice, but it really isn't. It really isn't a choice because it is about power. It's about social power. So I want you to think about those three dynamics, those three power dynamics overall. Those are all power over some other people. So those are the other things that I think we need to think about when we think about child on child abuse in that 40% dynamic. So I just wanted to lay that out there as well.
That's a very good point, Bonnie Jean. So now we're gonna, was a great segue because now we're gonna roll into consent. And as we go into consent, it's important for everybody watching to really know what their idea of consent is, because what we've found is that many people don't really understand what free consent means or what it is. And we couldn't possibly teach young people what it is if we don't fully know it ourselves. So while you're thinking about what consent is to you, I'm going to tell you what it is. It's so teaching kids about the skills of consent can help reduce sexual coercion, harassment, and even assault, just so we're on the same page. And that is assault between kids, okay, as well as kids understanding if they're about to be assaulted by an adult, if they have been assaulted by an adult, excuse me. So what consent is both or all partners are able to openly talk about and agree on what kind of activity they want to engage in, whether it's holding hands, kissing, touching, intercourse, or anything else. It's really important for everyone in the relationship to feel comfortable with what is happening and knowing what is happening. So this is like one of my favorite consent videos. It really lays it out there for you. So I'm going to share this and enjoy that, as I will.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, "No thank you," then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please, that's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind, and you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they are unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle or brew the tea and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down, make sure the unconscious person is safe, and this is the important part again, don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they are safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, "But you wanted tea last week," or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you are able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea.
That is just a delightful video. So, again, where are we going? The golden rule, the open line of communication. That's we're always going to go back to that. That's super, super, super important. And young children, you're going to want an open line of communication to be able to talk to them about consent. So, and we're going to start with asking permission. And this one almost makes me giggle every time I talk about it. Okay, but follow me on this. Trust me. So in young children, it is important to teach them how to receive the word no. Okay, I've got a 5-year-old. I know, I know you're out there and you're like, okay. But when you teach them how to receive the word no, you do that by asking them for permission first. Say, can I give you a hug? And you know what? If they say no, then you respect that. And that's teaching them how to receive the word no. How you receive the word no is picked up definitely by young children. So again, I have a 5-year-old. You got to stay consistent. It's going to get pretty tough out there for sometimes. I understand it. But when you ask for permission and you receive the word no, well, then they will start to receive the word no too, because they'll pick up what you're putting down. I hope that makes sense, Bonnie Jean.
It makes really, really good sense. And it is really, really hard for adults
Yes.
to receive the word no from children. It is something that we need to really kind of reframe our thinking and our upbringing and our processes and procedures from how we were brought up. Because we were brought up, to kind of toe the line that when adults told you to do something, you did it, and that was the way it was. And again, I'm going to go back to the fact that adults have consistently given us inconsistent messages, that they have given us cross messages. They have given us messages that have been mixed up all along the way, and then they have kind of punished children for it and told children they've been rude and disrespectful. And we really have to reframe our thinking and reframe the lens in which we look at things for children in terms of how we are creating these boundaries, and that we are really trying to help children understand that we're creating this culture of consent and this culture of boundaries and this culture of respect to protect them from predators. This is really what it's all about. We are getting rid of this culture of secrecy, silence, and shame, where someone could manipulate the situation, where they could then create an offending behavior against your child. And that's what we need to be able to do to tell the adults why we are doing what we're doing with our children, why we are saying, my child doesn't want to give you a hug. My child, is not comfortable giving you a kiss. My child, is saying no to X, Y, and Z. So that adults can understand that they're not being disrespectful. They're saying no because we're creating a culture of security and safety, not to be disrespectful, but to be safe and secure.
And really, it's a tall order, because I understand, because again, educators don't want to hear no as well, coaches don't want to hear no, and they receive those very badly in some cases. And so at the end of the day, we want to maintain a consistency around just showing little people respect as humans, because they are humans. Like, they're just little people that don't know the world just yet. Okay. So with that, again, I already talked about asking them if you can give them a hug or touch them. So, and understand that talking to kids about boundaries and consent is not a linear process, okay? Learning boundaries and consent go hand in hand. This presentation started with boundaries, sure, but that doesn't mean that's where you start and you check it off your box and you're like, okay, my child now understands boundaries. We're going to move on to consent. You have to like smush it in all together. It's not a straight line. So don't stress too much, just be consistent. Make sure you're delivering that message of respect, boundaries, and consent on a consistent basis, and do your best with it as a caregiver. I completely understand it is not super easy. With young children specifically, it is super not that easy, but if you maintain consistency and you realize that you didn't react the way you wanted to react, go back and let that child know, I didn't respond that well to that, and talk to them in a kid-friendly way, and just talk it out. Again, that open line of communication with young children is super, super important, and consistency is key. So I'm gonna say do your best and forget the rest, guys.
And sometimes you're going to have to go back and revisit it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're going to find that no matter how many times you have conversations with the adults around you, with your neighbors, with your families, with your friends, with teachers, with educators, with anyone and everyone, sometimes there will be someone who isn't actually buying into creating the same kind of culture of consent or boundaries, or doesn't understand, and it happens. And you're going to have another conversation with your child saying, this particular adult didn't understand, so we're going to start from square one. And you just remind the adult, oh, you know what? Jennifer isn't comfortable with being tickled. So can you not tickle Jennifer right now? Thank you. We're going to end that game. So we're not going to play that tickle game with Jennifer right now. She's not comfortable with that. Jennifer, why don't you go and play with Jeffrey and Susie over at the playground, and just end the conversation. Set the boundary right then and there, rename it right then and there, set the boundary, and then move on. And your child sees that you're setting the boundary consistently right there. You're not starting an argument. You're not, putting that person in, timeout. You're not being in your face. You're not starting an argument. You're not being, hurtful or anything like that, but you're still showing your child that you are being consistent. You are still the safe adult, and that you are still the one that they can trust to keep them safe. And that's how you do it. And that person can go, oh, okay, and understand that, oh, okay, I need to stop that now, and life goes on, and you have still created a sense of safety and security for your child.
So now we're going to move into adolescence, and this is going to be a little bit more, anything with adolescents and teens. That would explain my face. So anyway, have an open line of communication, right? So again, you may not have gotten the consent part down as young children, okay? Because these are relatively new concepts in the big scheme of things, right? We understand that. But as they become adolescents and teenagers, you know what? You can still do it. And maintaining that open line of communication is going to be paramount again. And not only paramount in teaching boundaries and consent, but paramount in making sure they're coming to you when they need something, or they need help. And because if they have someone to go to when they need help, they're not going to go to a predator. They're going to be less susceptible to predatory behavior, because you've already empowered them, but they know that they have you. And that's going to go a long way. So tip number 1 for adolescents, they are confused about a lot. Remember when you were an adolescent? I remember when I was really very confused. Like, I thought I knew what was happening, but I did not. That includes relationships and the idea of consent. And I'm telling you, if you go back and remember your adolescence, you will understand. You'll be like, that's correct. I knew little about relationships, and even less about the idea of consent. So just so you know, they're confused about a lot. So that's why you want to make them feel comfortable with asking you questions. Because if they're not comfortable with asking you questions, they're going to find that information out in places that that aren't good. So let them know that there's no question they may have about a relationship, sex, or boundaries is dumb, and you're a safe person to ask, because you want them to go to you. You do not want them to find it online, because what they'll find online is pornography, and we all know that's not real.
Or dangerous.
Kind of scary. Yeah, it's dangerous and scary. Yeah.
You know, because that's where the predators are available. That is where, you know, so that is the piece. And again, this is where the wondering comes in. This is where you have that opportunity to ask those wondering questions without judgment, where you can eliminate the secrecy, silence, my favorite three S words: secrecy, silence, and shame. You can eliminate that from your repertoire as a parent. It's really hard to do, but that as your child goes out to explore the world, they can see you as those secure hands that they can come back to ask those questions. But if you actually start asking questions of them in a wondering way, when you have those opportunities, like, gee, I wonder what you think about this, then they can come to you and say, well, I was thinking about this. It gives them the opportunity to get the accurate information, in a way that's safe and secure. I like those two S words, safe and secure, in a way that's healthy for them. And I think that's something to really consider again. And I think that this lends itself to when you think about gender identity questions, when you think about the LGBTQ community, those children who are really wondering as well. This is where families really start to shut down and don't have the conversation. And then those children go out into a more dangerous situation where they become even more open and more vulnerable to predators as well. And we want to be able to allow parents to have these open, wondering conversations with them so that they can get accurate information about their bodies and about their interactions with the world as well, so that everyone stays safe and secure.
So tip number 3 for adolescents is we're going to need to begin defining what sexual harassment is. This is where they need to know that. So you drive home the point that their body belongs to them, and that everybody needs to be respecting their boundaries and respecting other people's boundaries. And when I'm talking about defining sexual harassment, at the same time, we're talking to young people about what sexual harassment is and how it is unacceptable. We need to avoid using language that blames the victim force of sexual harassment, such as they shouldn't have been wearing something like that, or they were asking to be bothered. Because at the end of the day, when you use language like that with young people, they hear what you're saying. And if they are a victim of sexual harassment, the last person that they'll go to is you, because they would believe by the language that you're using that it was their fault anyway, and they will get in trouble. And that kind of takes away that open line of communication a little bit, and it takes away the trust that the adolescent may have in you if you are consistently using victim blaming language, which I understand is, again, we're talking about shifting the culture here, right? So I understand how difficult it is to monitor your language, but it will be worth it at the end of the day, especially if your child becomes a victim of sexual harassment at school. They'll have somewhere to go when it gets unbearable. I just said all this. It confuses the message to the children, and it offers them a way to justify being a bully and harassing others. So it says, hey, that's their fault. I can do this because they shouldn't have worn that. I can do this because they were asking for me to do this, because look at what they're wearing. So when you use language that is victim blaming, you are not only not allowing room for your the child to come forward and ask for help, but you're also allowing bullies and other kids to continue harassing other people, depending on the situation and the circumstances around it. So, that was an extra slide, sorry. We also want to talk about what a healthy relationship is. Discuss what it means for both to agree on what they will do together. For example, hugging and that first kiss and the subsequent kisses after that. We're in adolescence, so we're hoping we're not going all the way to intercourse, but again, just to make sure that they know and they have agreed to what they'll do together. Okay. And talk about the premise behind what a healthy relationship is.
And I think that piece, again, that consistent, if they change their mind at any point in time, that changing your mind at any point in time is okay. Stop means stop. Wait a minute means stop. Wait, means don't continue.
Yeah.
Any of those hesitations means hesitation, means stop, does not mean consent. All of those things. If you are uncertain of whether it means okay, whether it means yes, then it's not a yes. It is not a yes. Those are the key. Unless you hear yes, keep going. Don't keep going.
So with that one, we're going to roll on into teenagers. Again, the golden rule. I hope you guys have really, really gotten what I mean in here when I mean the open line of communication. So with teenagers, we're going to talk about consent and its connection to alcohol use and drug use. So I want to let you know, you talking about alcohol use and drug use doesn't encourage the use of alcohol or drugs, but it does encourage safety. It's important that we address the that they may inevitably run into or use alcohol or drugs, or people who are using. So when you do that, you need to let them know how alcohol use and drug use impair their ability to offer consent and hear consent. When I say impair, I mean they can't. It's not free consent. There we go. And so with that, I want to be clear about what free consent is. The idea will also play a role in their set boundaries. It's important that to apply this to adolescents as well. Be very, very clear about what free consent is. And if you don't know what free consent is, it's an enthusiastic yes. It's not as Betty Jean was saying earlier, it's not a it's not no. I hope that makes sense. So if there's silence, that's not yes. It's not, it's definitely not no. It's definitely not stop. It's an enthusiastic yes. So we want teens and adolescents to understand what free consent is. It's not consent based on coercion or consent based on persuasion. That's not free consent. If you have any questions about what free consent is, please ask them in the comments and we'll get back to you. But it's an enthusiastic yes. So with that, Bonnie Jean, if you had anything else to add, I'm going to run through the resources that we have available.
I think we have hit the nail on the head. If people have further questions, we're always available to answer and respond. I know we're going to throw our emails in there. We're always available. We always have trainings coming and going and left and right every month. So let's just go down that list of what we got going.
All right. So I talked about digital boundaries, and you know what? You can teach kids about how digital boundaries and the red flags of predatory behavior online and the apps that they're using. With our tips for keeping kids safe online, we go through all of that, and we also talk to you a little bit about social currency in the digital age. Bonnie Jean mentioned social currency earlier, for the most part, and so we can transfer that talk right into digital social currency as well, to understand why kids don't want to unfollow, and understand why kids don't want to block, and how digital bullying happens. So that's going to be June 23rd at 3 p.m. Bonnie Jean, I think Bonnie Jean's doing this one, but I'm not sure.
Yes, I am.
Okay. She's going to be having the Digital Stewards of Children training May 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. And we will accept questions on April 28th. We're going to have a Caregivers Roundtable. A Caregivers discussion about how to use the book Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And it's about how to talk to kids. That book's about how to talk to kids about pornography. It's a tough topic to talk about talk with children about, but necessary nonetheless. Bonnie Jean, if you want to weigh in on good pictures, bad pictures, you can, or we could just wait until.
I'm really excited about this one. It's going to be really a hands-on approach. We're going to be delving into actually a book. I'm going to be reading the book and giving these strategies and tips as outlined in the book for parents as to how to talk to your child about what is happening online. And statistically speaking, 1 in 5 children are solicited via the internet for sexual solicitation. So we want to make sure that parents know what's happening online with their children. And because more than 50% of the children in the United States have a handheld computer in their hand at all times. And now through COVID, it's increased twofold, threefold. So we want to make sure parents know how to handle the situation.
I also want to let parents know that a lot of the child sexual abuse material are actually that's online is actually self-generated child sexual abuse material. And what do I mean by that? It's the kids taking pictures of themselves, because
yes,
youth attitudes towards sending nudes is now normal behavior. We addressed that a little bit in tips for keeping kids safe online, but at the end of the day, we also need you to understand that it's a norm now and not an anomaly.
Correct.
Yes. So with that, we are going to log on off. Thank you all for being here today. We had quite a few people watch us live on Facebook. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and we follow our lives and we will answer them as they come in.
Thank
With
you.
that, thanks so much.